Well, hello and welcome to an episode of Camilla and I. I'm Mark Cooper, a Royal Photography Society wildlife photographer based here in the UK. And today on Camilla and I, we've got a very interesting topic for you, I think. Anyway, we're just on our tea break and we've retired to the office, i.e. the back of the camper van, because it's blowing absolutely coolie out there. Absolutely incredible. So anyway, we've had to record this in here. Anyway, as usual on Camilla and I, don't forget to watch till the end of Camilla and I, because we have been out with the Sony A1 and the A9III, which is subject for discussion today on Camilla and I. But we have got one of the largest birds here in the UK for you from Salisbury Plain. So if you can guess what that is, or you can just zip ahead to later on if you're not interested in the A1 and the A9III. Amazing. So what are we going to discuss today? Well, the discussion is the A9III better for wildlife photography than the Sony A1 Mark II? Because we already had it down in an earlier episode where we were comparing the A9III with the Sony A1. We already had the A9III down as potentially the winner with the pre-capture and all the new features, all the newfangled body and everything else. I think we decided that the A9III was better than the Sony A1 despite its 50 megapixels. Anyway, today we're discussing whether it's now better than the A1 too. So I thought this was a topic I'd never be addressing in a video like this one, because I assumed that the A1 II would take on all the characteristics of the A9III, and my A9III would be completely redundant. But no way, Jose, as they say in Spain, I think. With the 50 megapixels, the same sensor as the A1 before, with the identical body to the A9III, I mean, what could you possibly not love about the A1 II? So we have a clear winner in the A1 II, so we can all pack up and go home now. Well, no, not exactly. That's why I'm making this video. So I purchased the A9III 6 months ahead of the release of the A1 Mark II, and I probably would have gone straight to the A1 Mark II if I hadn't bought the A9III. And anyway, I was very glad I did buy the A9III, because obviously it got me used to all the functions and features on the new A1 II 6 months in advance, like pre-capture and items like that. Excuse me a sec. So the A9III was very useful for that alone. And indeed, I must admit, straight out of the block, if I was a sports photographer and I had a deadline to meet and everything else, I would choose the A9III over the A1 II every day of the week, purely for frame rate and speed of acquisition. So in this video, I will go over where the A9III still actually wins, and still where obviously the A1 II wins. I think the A1 II wins are a little bit more obvious than the A9III, but anyway, we'll start with the A9III wins. Then you can make up your own mind which one is the better camera and which one suits you for your style of wildlife. Because they're about the same price. I think there's about £1,000 in it. But anyway, so diving straight in with the A9III, there's a couple of things that the A1 II still can't do. The first one is the A1 only shoots at 30 frames per second. Now, I hear you all cry, wow, what? It only shoots at 30 frames per second? That's amazing. Yes, it is amazing. It's beautiful that it does shoot at 30 frames per second, but the A9III shoots up to 120 frames per second in 25 megapixel resolution, but still a full frame size in RAW. So amazing difference, and 4 times as many shots to the A9III. And unless you've used an A9III or a high frame rate camera, you won't really appreciate the difference and the number of extra shots that this A9III generates. It's actually far too many, and that's a whole problem in itself. But you do get a decisive moment. Wildlife action, just like sports action, is incredibly quick. It can be over in a couple of seconds. Anything, fly past, a kingfisher diving into water to catch a fish. Anyway, the action can be lightning fast. And although the A1 too does a great job of capturing the action, it's not as good at the frames per second rate as the A1. And honestly, you do miss shots not having the A9III. I know it sounds remarkable and it sounds nitpicky, but it's not. 4 times as many shots is a big deal. Just like in the old days when you had a roll of 36 film to shoot your wildlife photography shots. If you remember, you went back and you got absolutely nothing, not unless you'd set the shot up completely, because in the old days 36 pictures straight off wasn't enough, and the frame rate was still 10-12 frames per second, but nowhere near could you capture the action. And it's a bit like that now. It's a similar difference. When you're shooting at 120 frames per second as opposed to 30, you have got a 4 times advantage to get that decisive frame. And this is the winner element of the A9III at the moment. If you're close enough to your subject, the A9III's 25 megapixels as opposed to the A1 Mark II's 50 is plenty enough, as I've demonstrated on more than one occasion. And indeed, if you've got a bird taking off, for example, with the A1 II, I often get 4 or 5 frames in the of the bird in the frame, whereas the A9III, I will get up to 15 in the same burst. Absolutely incredible. And it's these little differences that do matter. These days, I must admit, it's the sharpness of the photo I'm looking for more than the number of megapixels. You can get away with quite amazing action shooting the A9III because the software is so good. I mean, I used to shoot with the Sony A9 and that was 25 megapixels, and that was plenty enough back in the day. So yeah, it's no mean slouch. 25 megapixels is plenty, and if you're in the right spot. Anyway, while we're on the subject of keepers, why would I favour at the moment potentially the A9III's use over the Sony A1? Well, another factor, a key factor, is the autofocus at the moment. I don't know whether it's the global shutter on the A9III or whatever it is. Hopefully it's just a technical firmware update for the Sony A1 II, because at the moment I find the autofocus is actually better on the A9III. Built presumably for sports photographers in mind, it just seems to latch onto the action much quicker than the A1 II and sticks with it much more predictably. So anyway, I don't know if you've owned the A1 II and the A9III, whether you can confirm this in the comments below, whether it's just my imagination. But I believe there have been some letters sent to Sony about this very issue, that people want the A1 II to operate autofocusly as good as the A9III. So anyway, if there's an issue there, let us know. So again, an issue with the actual focus means shots you'll get with the A9III, you'll miss with the A1 too. So again, I appeal to anybody out there who has the two, does this bear out? And yeah, anyway. So as with all wildlife photography, getting to know your subject and getting in position is far more important than the actual camera you use. But obviously, when you've achieved the position and you've got your perfect shot in front of you, you want to actually capture that action. And yeah, it's amazing. And here, I think we're talking about a couple of different styles in wildlife photography. I must admit, I haven't been a sort of spray and pray photographer. And I don't take numerous shots of the same sort of static subject. Well, we all try and avoid this, don't we? If it's just about to fly off in the past without pre-capture, obviously you had your finger on there a little bit longer than necessary on quite a few occasions. Anyway, so the A1 II, so the A1 Mark II is brilliant for being in position, and with the 50 megapixels, I would choose it every time. For the long reach, for the resolution, for the quality, the dynamic range is a whole stop better than the A9III. So still, the A1 Mark II wins hands out over the A9III on the ability to crop, for example. Absolutely amazing. But if you're in on your subject, then this doesn't apply. And if you've done the necessary footwork and fieldcraft to get in on your subject, I would suggest the A9III is plenty good enough for your wildlife photography. So a good friend of the channel, Jonathan, he shoots thousands of photos. I think he did a safari the other day, 10-day safari, and he shot 100,000 images. And well, you think this sort of approach is well, sheer lunacy. I mean, God, you've got to get through all those photos when you go back. But if you use something like Raw Previewer, the software these days, you can cull photos in no time at all. And anyway, he goes through his photos, and then, of course, he picks out the decisive moment. I know he uses majority at the moment. I think he does use the A1 Mark II, just as I do, hasten to add. It's not a clear enough winner to use the A9III all the time, I would suggest. But I would suggest there are clear uses for the A9III, and I'm very glad I didn't have to swap in my A9III for the A1 Mark II. So yeah, we feel very privileged on Camilla and I. Amazing. And the other element with the A9III, which I didn't think would come into play, is the fact it's got a global shutter. Now, I thought a global shutter, totally irrelevant, this, that and the other. But I must admit, I have got some shots using the global shutter, dragonflies in flight, for example, with no distortion on the wings at all. Now, I suppose in the past you could pass this distortion off as just part of the wildlife photography and the arch of the particular wing or something like that. But now you actually have the A9III. I do actually see the difference between the helicopter blades and the non-helicopter blades, particularly if you're doing something like demoiselle, the banded demoiselle, for example, or indeed dragonflies with the wings going at 4,000 or 8,000, I think it was, wing beats per second. And again, I will use the A9III when I can get in close enough over the A1 II. Yeah, so as usual in wildlife photography, it's not a clear-cut decision. And I think when I purchased the A1 Mark II, I did say at the time I think there were a few things I would miss from the A9III. And I must admit, I didn't think I'd miss them quite as much as I do. And certainly, if Sony can get on with a firmware update to just tweak the autofocus system a little bit more in line with the A9III, that would be absolutely superb if you're watching Sony. Anyway, I mean, basically, I throw it over to you. I mean, I still confess, is the A9III the better wildlife camera than the A1 II? Well, I'll say no, because I still try and use the A1 Mark II more than the A9III. But I am now using them far more in conjunction. As you can see today, I got some shots of the great bustard. Oh, sugar, gave it away. Yeah, I got some shot of the great bustard with this combination, the 300mm 2x converter and the A9III, and I got the majority of the footage with the A1 Mark II and the 600mm with 1.4 lens. That's because great bustards are, well, a bit fearful of man. I think man ate them to distinction at one point here on Salisbury Plain, and now they've been reintroduced. Obviously, you still have to keep your distance, so you can't go bounding up to a great bustard. Indeed, I actually shot most of my footage of the bustard today out of the van window just to avoid any disturbance whatsoever. Anyway, anyway, let me know in the comments what you think, whether, you know, has Mark gone totally mad again? A9III can nowhere near be as good as the A1 II. But all I'm saying is if I hadn't acquired the A1 Mark II, I would not be disappointed now. I'd be quite happy, although I wouldn't know it, with the A9III Mark II. And obviously, having said that, obviously we still do favour the A1 Mark II. So anyway, have a good one. I've confused everybody now, I think. I've confused myself. Which camera am I using next? Don't know. Okay, anyway, have a good one. Bye from Camilla and I.